My name is Charlotte Hensley. I'm 34 and I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Manchester. I spend my days finding numbers that don't add up, hidden transfers, quiet discrepancies, the small inconsistencies people think no one will ever notice. I'm good at my job. I'm good at noticing things, which is exactly why, on the night that changed my life, I should have trusted my instincts 3 weeks earlier than I did. But let me start with the moment that matters. Valentine's Day, 8:47 p.m. I was standing outside the private dining room of the Ivy on Spinningfields, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon I'd saved for 11 months, wearing the navy dress my husband once said made him fall in love with me all over again. I had booked this exact table 3 weeks in advance. I had planned every detail, and through the frosted glass door, I could see two silhouettes. One was kneeling. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I did not open that door immediately. I stood there, champagne bottle sweating in my hand, and I listened. Because some part of me, the part trained to notice when numbers don't reconcile, already knew whose voice belonged to that second silhouette. Before I take you into that room, I need you to understand who I was the morning this story started, because that's the version of me my husband was counting on. Quiet, trusting, the wife who didn't ask questions. I met Daniel Whitfield 7 years ago at a conference in Leeds. He was charming in the specific way ambitious men are charming, attentive, quick with compliments, always aware of who was watching. He worked in operations for a logistics startup back then, 12 employees, a leaky office above a laundrette, big dreams and no money. I fell for the dreams. I fell for the way he talked about building something from nothing. We married 2 years later at a registry office with 40 guests and a reception at my parents' garden in the Cotswolds. Simple, real. Daniel's mother cried through the whole ceremony and told me I'd civilized him. I laughed it off then. I understand it differently now. Over the next 5 years, Daniel's company grew. 12 employees became 60, 60 became 240. And somewhere in that growth, a woman named Victoria Ashworth was brought in as CEO, recruited from a private equity firm in London, the kind of executive who wears power the way other people wear perfume. Quietly, but you notice it the second she enters a room. I met Victoria exactly twice in 3 years, both times at company Christmas parties. Both times, she looked at me the way you look at furniture. Present, unremarkable, easily walked around. I didn't think much of it then. I had no reason to. But 3 weeks before Valentine's Day, I found something in Daniel's home office that I wasn't looking for. And once a forensic accountant finds one number that doesn't add up, she cannot stop looking for the rest. It was a Tuesday evening. Daniel was at a quarterly offsite in Edinburgh, which I now know was neither quarterly nor an offsite. I was looking for the printer paper he kept in his office cabinet when I noticed his laptop bag, unzipped, tucked beside the filing drawer. A single folded receipt had slipped halfway out of the front pocket. I want to be honest about something. I almost didn't look. 7 years of marriage teaches you which drawers you don't open, which pockets you don't check, because trust is supposed to mean something. But the receipt had already fallen onto the carpet, face up, and forensic accountants don't get to choose which numbers find them. It was from a jeweler on Bond Street. 18,400 pounds, a ring? Not my ring size. I know my ring size the way I know my own birthday, because Daniel had asked me twice before our engagement, terrified of getting it wrong. This was a size 6. Mine is a size 8. I sat on the floor of his office for 11 minutes with that receipt in my hand, and I did what I always do when a number doesn't reconcile. I didn't panic. I documented. I photographed the receipt. I noted the date, the amount, the jeweler's name, the timestamp. Then I folded it exactly as I had found it and slipped it back into the pocket. That night, I opened our joint banking portal, the one Daniel thought I never checked because you handle the budgeting, I handle the investments. Except I don't just handle budgeting. I audit companies for a living. I know how to read a statement the way other people read a novel. There it was. A transfer to a company card routed through an expense account I didn't recognize. Ashworth Retreat Solutions Limited. I searched the name. It didn't exist on Company's House, a shell, or a private code name for something Daniel didn't want tracked back to him. I kept looking. 3 hotel charges in the past 4 months, all in London, all on nights Daniel told me he was staying over for work. 2 of those nights I distinctly remembered were nights Victoria Ashworth had posted on LinkedIn about closing a major private equity round from a hotel in Mayfair. I didn't confront him, not yet. I want you to understand why, because I think some of you will recognize this feeling. It wasn't fear. It was the same instinct I get at work when I suspect fraud, but don't yet have the full paper trail. You don't accuse a company of embezzlement based on one receipt. You build the file first, because once you show your hand too early, the evidence disappears, and so does your credibility. So I did what I do best. I opened a private folder on my laptop. I labeled it Q1 Reconciliation. The most boring name I could think of, the kind of file Daniel would scroll past without a second glance. And I started building a case against my own husband. 3 weeks later, I would need every single page of it. Over those 3 weeks, the folder grew the way evidence always grows once you know where to look. I found a second hotel charge from a boutique in Chelsea, a men's tailor, a suit fitting Daniel had never mentioned. I found a calendar invite on our shared family calendar, quietly deleted after 20 minutes, that I'd caught only because my phone had already synced a preview notification. V, private dinner, 8 p.m., confirm venue. I didn't say a word to him, not when he came home from Edinburgh smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. Not when he mentioned, almost too casually over dinner, that Victoria had been under a lot of pressure lately, and he'd been handling more of the board relationship than usual. Not even when he booked a table at the Ivy for Valentine's Day and told me, with a warmth that now curdled in my stomach, "I want this one to be special, Char. I've got something important to ask you." I remember exactly what I felt hearing that sentence, not hope. Suspicion sharpened into something colder and more precise. Because I had already seen the receipt for a ring that wasn't my size, and I understood with the same clarity I bring to a fraud case that something important to ask you was not a sentence meant for me at all. It was a sentence he'd rehearsed for someone else, and he'd let it slip out early, the way guilty people always leak the truth before they mean to. 2 days before Valentine's Day, I made a decision that would define everything that followed. I called my brother Thomas, who works in corporate security and has access to systems I don't. I didn't ask him to spy. I asked him one question: was Ashworth Retreat Solutions Limited registered anywhere, under any name, in any jurisdiction? It took him 4 hours to find it. Registered in Guernsey, 2 directors, Daniel Whitfield, Victoria Ashworth. I sat with that information for a long time. Not the betrayal of an affair, that alone would have been enough to end a marriage. This was something colder. My husband and his CEO had quietly built a private holding company together, funneling money through hotel stays and gifts, and, I would later confirm, an advance withdrawal against Daniel's shares in the very company I'd watched him build from a leaky office above a laundrette. He wasn't just leaving me for her. He was preparing to leave with something. And whatever that something was, it was substantial enough to need its own offshore paperwork. I booked the same restaurant Daniel had booked, but for a different table, 30 minutes earlier, using my maiden name so the reservation wouldn't cross-reference with his. I told him I had a girls' night that would run late. I put on the navy dress. I brought the champagne I'd been saving for our anniversary, not as celebration, but as evidence of my own that I had walked in there in good faith, prepared to be surprised the way a loving wife plans to be. I had no idea yet exactly what I would see through that frosted glass door. But I already knew, in the part of me that never stops auditing, that I was about to find the final page of the file. I stood outside that frosted glass door for 4 minutes before I opened it, long enough to hear Daniel's voice, low and rehearsed, saying words I recognized instantly because I'd heard an earlier draft of them 7 years ago in a registry office. "You changed everything for me. You saw what I could become before I saw it myself." Through the glass, I watched him lower himself onto one knee. I watched Victoria Ashworth, 41 years old, sharp blazer, the same composed expression she wore in every board photo, bring a hand to her mouth in practiced surprise. I opened the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. Forensic auditors don't announce themselves with noise. They announce themselves with the one document nobody in the room expects them to be holding. Daniel turned first. His face did something I will remember for the rest of my life. A full-body recalculation, the exact look I've seen on company directors when I lay a spreadsheet in front of them that proves they've been stealing from their own shareholders. Victoria turned second, slower, already assembling her expression into something professional, something unbothered because women like her are trained never to look caught. Charlotte. Daniel said my name like a man testing whether the floor beneath him was still there. I didn't raise my voice. I want to be clear about that, because I think what happened next only worked because I refused to give either of them the scene they were braced for. "Don't get up on my account," I said. I wouldn't want to interrupt the merger. Victoria's composure held for exactly 2 seconds before something behind her eyes shifted. She was quick. She'd already understood faster than Daniel had that I hadn't walked in blind. Charlotte, this isn't what it... Ashworth Retreat Solutions, I said. Registered in Guernsey, 2 directors. I have the incorporation documents in my email, sent to myself an hour ago, along with 4 hotel receipts, a jeweler's invoice for a ring and a size 6, and a deleted calendar entry that your assistant, Daniel, forgot syncs to our shared account. The private dining room, small, candlelit, built for exactly this kind of theater, went completely silent. A waiter hovering near the door quietly stepped back out and closed it behind him, the way good staff do when they sense a table has stopped being about food. Daniel was still on one knee. It was, I noted with something that almost resembled pity, the least dignified position a man could be caught in. "Get up," I told him. "You look ridiculous down there." He stood. Victoria did not sit back down. She remained standing too, arms folded now, the boardroom posture returning to her like armor she'd forgotten to put on before the evening started. "How long?" I asked, looking directly at her. "Have you been planning to leave your husband, Victoria? Or is he not part of tonight's paperwork?" Her jaw tightened. And for the first time since I'd walked through that door, I watched the CEO of a 240-person company have absolutely nothing prepared to say. Victoria recovered faster than Daniel did. She always would. That was the entire problem with him choosing her. She had spent her career negotiating with people who thought they held the advantage, and she wasn't about to let a forensic accountant in a navy dress unravel her in front of witnesses. "Charlotte, I understand you're upset, but perhaps this conversation should happen privately between you and Daniel." "There is no version of this conversation that's private anymore," I said. "You made sure of that the moment you put both your names on a Guernsey holding company funded by withdrawals against shares in a business I watched him build from nothing. That's not a private matter, Victoria. That's a disclosure issue. And I imagine your board would find it very interesting." Her arms unfolded. That was the tell. 41 years of composure, and the one thing that finally cracked her was the word board. Daniel found his voice again, thin and pleading in a way I'd never heard from him. "Charlotte, please, let's just go home and talk about this like adults." "We are adults, Daniel. That's exactly why I'm not going home with you. I'm going home. You can figure out where you're going." I set the champagne bottle down on the table between them, unopened. "I brought this for our anniversary. I think it suits your engagement better than mine." I turned to Victoria one last time. "For what it's worth, I hope the 240 employees who work for you never find out their CEO structured an offshore vehicle with the husband of a woman she'd met exactly twice at a Christmas party. But I'm a details person. I imagine someone will find out eventually. People like me always do." I walked out of that private dining room the same way I'd walked in. Steady, unhurried, the file already sent to 3 email addresses that weren't mine, including my brother's and my solicitor's. 6 weeks later, Daniel moved out. The divorce was quiet, procedurally at least, because I had every document I needed before he even knew there was a case to answer. His solicitor tried to argue the Guernsey company wasn't marital property. Mine simply forwarded the incorporation papers showing it was funded in part by an early withdrawal against shares acquired during our marriage. That argument ended the same afternoon it started. Victoria resigned from her position 4 months later. Officially, the company cited a mutual decision to pursue new opportunities. Unofficially, I heard from a former colleague that 2 board members had asked very specific questions about an offshore entity that had surfaced during an unrelated compliance review. I didn't send that review. I didn't need to. Some numbers, once they exist, find their own way to the surface. I still work in forensic accounting. I still spend my days finding the things people hope no one will notice. And I've learned something I didn't know before, that Valentine's Day, the most important audit I ever did, wasn't for a client. It was for my own marriage, and I'm grateful every day that I trusted the numbers over the ring on my finger. That's my story. 1 dress, 1 bottle of champagne I never opened, and a folder labeled Q1 reconciliation that ended a marriage and a career in the same evening.